Good Wednesday afternoon, friends. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with your tropical update. We're talking about the Atlantic Basin, and we're going to jump over to the Eastern Pacific for some potential tropical impacts in Southern California. Dual hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, Danielle and Earl, two areas of interest, one that's already been tagged as Invest 95L. You can tell we're close to the peak of the season, 3 days out. Today is September 7th. 2022. Here's a look at the Atlantic Basin overall. We've got Hurricane Earl, that's a Category 1, expected to become a Category 4 as it passes just east of Bermuda. Danielle still churning, still hanging on as a Category 1 hurricane, despite being so far to the north. And here are our two waves. The one with a high chance of developing, 70%, is now known as Invest 95L, and it will potentially get the name Fiona, which is the next one on the list. All right, here's a look at Earl. Now, it's been modestly intensifying over the last 24 hours as a hurricane, Category 1, 85-mile-per-hour wind, so mid-range Category 1 right now. And if it weren't for wind shear that's been pretty potent coming in out of the west aloft, tilting the system, this would be rapidly intensifying for sure. Now, it is eventually moving north and into a little less hostile of an environment, which is why it's expected to develop a little bit more quickly and potentially be a candidate for some rapid intensification. We're going to talk about exactly what that means in just a second. We have Hurricane Hunter aircraft out in this system again today. This is one of over a dozen missions so far that's been into the storm since it first got its name about what was it, on Friday, I think it was. Moving to the north at 8 miles per hour, and it has, though, intensified a bit in terms of its central pressure, down to 974 millibars. Here's how it looks on visible satellite imagery. It doesn't look as tilted as it did 48 hours ago, despite that ongoing strong wind shear out of the west that was dislocating a lot of its convection from its low-level center, say, back on Monday. So it has really intensified and organized itself up against that, so it's standing up more vertically, it's ventilating more properly. In the last couple frames here, you can really start to see an eye starting to warm and clear on out, and that's a sign that we're about to see this really take a jump in intensification, which is why the National Hurricane Center says we're going to get up to a major hurricane status. In fact, not even stop there, go up to a Category 4 likely with 130-mile-per-hour winds. Also take note of where that intensification happens as it's heading into the North Atlantic, which typically you'd expect to find cooler and cooler ocean waters the more latitude you gain. Not so much this time around. Water temperatures are sufficiently warm well to the north of here, 80 degrees or warmer, which is where we found Danielle, which still continues to hold on to hurricane status. There's Bermuda right there. Tropical storm warnings are up for the island nation, and that is because they're going to be swiped by the storm. They will be on the cleaner side of things, on the eastern side of, on the western side of the storm as it passes to the east. So that'll bring winds in out of the north to northeast. Tropical storm force winds are expected there. In fact, there's a 90% chance. So now as this begins to intensify, maybe even rapidly, it may see an increase in maximum sustained winds of 30 knots or 34 miles per hour in about 24 hours worth of time. We're not there yet. Here's a look at past advisories. We'll go back over 24 hours and you'll see there's only been a 22 millibar drop. That's pretty significant, but only a 20 mile per hour increase in its sustained winds. Of course, we need to get that up to around 34 miles per hour, which I think we may see going forward in the next 2 days or so. All right, here's the forecast wind projections in terms of tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour or greater. For Bermuda, we're looking at 60, 70, 80% chance of seeing those winds as the center of Earl passes by to the east. All right, now let's jump over to Danielle. That's way in the North Atlantic. Look at its latitude, 43 degrees north, still a Category 1 hurricane with winds at 80 miles per hour, and still has that satellite presentation of a hurricane, despite it being so far in the North Atlantic. Even on visible satellite imagery here, you still see some remnants of an eye trying to warm and clear on out there that far in the North Atlantic. Now, this is pretty cool here. So now these are sea surface temperature anomalies, the departures from average. Overall, I first want you to look at how warm above normal these temperatures are in the North Atlantic. We're talking 5 degrees or more above the long-term average in areas here off of Nova Scotia. Now, these temperatures are not warm enough to support tropical development. They're not 80 degrees or warmer, but they're about 5 to 7 degrees above where they should be. And as Danielle sat over this area here and churned, It contributed to lower sea surface temperatures. It zapped the energy out of the ocean, the heat content, used it to sustain its development. Upwelled the ocean, kicked up cooler waters from a depth, and replaced those surface waters that were very warm with cooler surface temperatures. So it left what we call a sea surface temperature scar. You could see where that sat and spun for a couple of days, and now it's got to move on. You can even see a little bit of a trail there where it's going currently. So it's very interesting to see that kind of a remnant scar of what it's left behind. All right, now let's look at the track for Hurricane Danielle. Moving to the northeast, it's picking up that speed now after being almost stationary through the entirety of the weekend. Still at 75 miles per hour by this evening, still a hurricane. And then it goes extratropical and kind of sits and spins and then goes back off to the south, southwest, and southeast, dropping even possibly closer to Portugal and Spain. Very interesting to watch how this plays on out over the next couple of days. All right, also out there in the Atlantic Basin, we've got those two waves, those two areas of interest. 70% chance that this gets a name, Fiona. The one behind it up to low chance is 30% chance. This has been tagged as Invest 95L. You can see our next two names on the list here are Fiona and Gaston. That would complete our first portion of the list here for 2022. All right, in terms of how far out they're from land, they're very far out in the Atlantic. No threat to the United States. In fact, the forecast tracks on this take it out to sea, very similar to what Earl did, so no real threat there. But even so, still 10 to 12 days out on Invest 95L and over 2 weeks out with the wave coming off the coast of Africa. So let's talk about Invest 95L here. Look at how fast it's cruising to the west-northwest, flying 28 miles per hour. You can see it's almost getting its act together a little bit ahead of schedule here. You can sort of see some organization. That's why it's up to 70% chance now in 2 days. The same odds over the next 5 or so. So where's it going? Well, we're getting spaghetti plot models on this, and each line is a different computer model. Notice this looks very similar to what Earl was doing, although it took that turn to the north as it was north of Puerto Rico. So this looks to be taking that turn north and out to sea, well to the east of Bermuda. But again, there are some outlying members here that do carry it westwards a little bit longer. So nothing set in stone. We'll have to see how everything plays on out as we go through time. But as of right now, no threat to the United States. Now let's jump over to the Eastern Pacific, where we have a system that will likely impact the United States in Southern California, an area that doesn't usually see any tropical sort of weather features coming into its area, and this one looks to be that. Hurricane K right now, Category 2 hurricane with winds of 105 miles per hour, moving to the north-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Now check out the forecast track on this. All throughout the Baja California Sur area, Baja California, up to hurricane warnings in the pink, tropical storm warnings in the orange, and tropical storm watches in the yellow, stretching all the way up to the U.S.-Mexico border here in Southern California. Now, the storm lifts north, pretty much hugging the coast, and then it begins to weaken as it encounters cooler ocean waters. It's away from its warm energy source, which are 80-degree water temperatures or more. So here we are Saturday morning, 45-mile-per-hour winds, still classified as a tropical storm, but at this point in time, it's heading away from the coast, but what it's going to do is throw a bunch of tropical moisture into Southern California, and the models keep upping totals that they're forecasting. In the yellows and purples and reds here, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain potentially, and this area is dealing with severe drought conditions. So this is all welcome rainfall, but of course it could result in some flooding. We'll have to watch how things play on out there as we head into the upcoming weekend. All right, that's the broad overall summary of what's going on in the Atlantic and Pacific basins. If anything changes, of course, we'll have an update for you, but I'll see you again tomorrow. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.